The iron tasted like old blood when Evangeline bit down on the chain to stop herself from crying out. Her wrists were already raw where the manacles had rubbed skin to wet red, and every jolt from the guard's boot sent a hot ache up her arms and into her spine. The corridor to Frostborn's lower tribunal was carved from glacier stone, slick with damp, lit by blue witch fire that made everyone look dead. She'd walked these halls 100 times as a healer carrying poultices and hope. Today she was dragged through them like carrion. "On your knees," one guard barked. Her knees struck the stone dais so hard her breath punched out. Pain flared low in her belly, sharp enough to make her vision flicker. Not now. Please, Moon, not now. The chamber smelled of cedar smoke and wolf musk and polished antler. Frostborn elders sat in a crescent on raised benches, white furred cloaks draped over shoulders gone soft with power. At the center stood Darius Frostborn, her mother's brother, her one-time guardian, silver at his temples and sympathy painted neatly across his face like war paint. "Evangeline Shadowfang," Darius said, voice carrying clean and clear, "formerly Palace Healer. Formerly." As if her hands had forgotten how to save. He paced before her, each step deliberate. "You stand accused of negligence in the highest chamber, of tampering with fertility drafts, of poisoning hope itself in the womb of our Luna." A murmur rolled through the benches. Evangeline lifted her head despite the guard's hand shoving it down. "I did not poison anyone." Silence. Elder Maera's bangled fingers drummed the armrest. "The Luna bled for 2 nights. The child was lost. You brewed her tea." "I brewed exactly what was prescribed." Her voice shook with exhaustion and fury. "Check the records. Check." Darius sighed as if weary with her stubbornness. The records were checked. Liar. She knew the jars in the apothecary had been moved, labels rewritten in a hand that imitated hers poorly. She knew because she'd found her own ledger torn, pages missing from the week before the miscarriage. She knew because 2 witnesses swore they'd seen her carry Nightbane root where she'd carried nettle instead. She knew because truth did not matter once fear found a scapegoat. From the side bench, a woman she'd once sat with during winter feasts spat at the floor. "My sister couldn't conceive for 6 years, and this witch made her lose her first moon-blessed chance." Another voice, male, hard. "Hang her before she curses another womb." The room swelled with hatred. It came in waves, pressing against her skin like sleet. Evangeline curled her fingers around her own wrists to hide their trembling. Under her torn tunic, beneath bruises and hunger hollows, her belly was beginning to round. Not enough for anyone distracted by rage to see. Enough for her to feel the secret weight, the tiny flutter that had become the reason she still breathed. She had told no one, not even the moon altar. A disgraced, unmated she-wolf carrying a child while under accusation of killing the Luna's heir. If they knew, they would call it contamination and cut the bloodline out of her before sunrise. Darius stopped in front of her. For one heartbeat his expression dropped, the mask cracking to reveal something cold and pleased. Then pity returned. "The council is merciful. You will not be executed." Relief almost made her dizzy. "You will be exiled at dawn," he continued, "branded oathbreaker, cast beyond the black pines without escort, supplies, or claim to shelter. In winter, during wolf hunt season." It was execution with prettier words. "Please," Evangeline said before she could swallow the word. Humiliation burned her throat. "I served this pack since I could hold a needle. Let me face a truth stone. Let the moon witnesses test my scent against poison. I beg the council." Elder Mara gave a thin smile. "True stones are for wolves with honor." A guard kicked the back of Evangeline's calf and she folded forward, palms scraping stone. Laughter crackled along the benches. Darius crouched, close enough that only she could hear. His breath smelled of mint and rot. Take the exile, little niece. Quietly. Don't make me choose harsher remedies. Her pulse thudded in her ears. You did this. He straightened before anyone else could notice her whisper. Remove her. 2 guards hauled her up. Her abdomen tightened again, harder this time, and a gasp escaped her despite every effort. One guard sneered. Crying already? Dawn's not here yet. As they dragged her toward the cells, voices followed. Rot in the snow, poisoner. May your womb dry and your line end. Shadowfang filth. That last one struck deepest. Shadowfang. The name spoken like disease. Her mother had told her stories of their line, ward keepers, healers bound to old runes, wolves whose voices could wake stone. Centuries dead, the elders said, conveniently dead. Erased so no one would ask why their records had vanished from the archives. By the time the cell door slammed, Evangeline was shaking with cold and fury and fear so thick she tasted copper. She pressed both hands to her stomach, forehead touching chained wrists. I know, she whispered when a faint flutter answered from within. I know. I won't let them take you. Dawn had not come yet when the breaking point arrived wearing her uncle's boots. Darius dismissed the jailer with a flick of his fingers and stood outside her bars, lantern light carving planes into his face. Night silence wrapped the corridor. Even the torches hissed softly, as if listening. Evangeline didn't rise from the straw. Conserving strength had become instinct. Here to watch me freeze before sunrise? I came with an offer. He set a folded cloak just out of reach. There are wolves in the lower terraces still loyal to me. They can make your exile brief. Her mouth went dry. Brief. A clean throat cut beyond the border. No scavengers. Mercy from you? She laughed once, cracked. What do you really want? His eyes dropped, too quickly to her midsection. Not long enough for certainty, long enough for terror. He knew. Darius crouched near the bars, voice low and almost gentle. I know what you're hiding, Ava. Her back hit the wall before she realized she'd moved. You're wrong. Please. He waved dismissively. I tracked your herb orders for months. Red raspberry leaf, iron moss, sunroot tea, midwife blends in a healer's quantities. You should have been subtler. Every muscle in her body locked around one command. Run. It doesn't have to be ugly, he said. Come with me now. I can keep the scandal quiet. The child can be repurposed. The word punched the air from her lungs. For what? She whispered. His smile was tiny and monstrous. For stability. There are rituals older than kings. Blood answers blood. Shadowfang blood answers best. She tasted bile. Her mother had warned her never to trust the way Darius spoke of old magic, like a butcher admiring knives. You forged the records, she said. You framed me for the Luna. Framed? His brows rose. No, little niece. I redirected chaos. The Luna was already weak. He stood, impatience sharpening his voice. Enough. We leave before first bell. If you resist, I'll have the jailer drag you to the stone table and we'll remove the problem now. The problem. Her wolf slammed against her ribs, frantic and feral. Darius turned away, speaking over his shoulder. Think carefully. Dawn is cruel to motherless pups. He walked off, boots fading into dark. Evangeline stayed still until the corridor settled into silence again. Then she moved. 3 months in the lower infirmary had taught her where the mortar in old cells crumbled. 2 years cataloging prison injuries had taught her what guards forgot. She slid the iron pin she'd hidden in her braid and knelt by the drain near the back wall. The grate was rusted, bolts loose. She worked the pin under the first screw, wrist screaming as shackles bit deeper. Twist, slip, breathe. On the third bolt, footsteps sounded. She flattened, pretending sleep, while a patrol passed. Snow wind sighed through arrow slits high above. A man coughed, spit, moved on. Twist, Slip. Breathe. When the grate came free, the hole beyond looked barely wide enough for a fox. She exhaled, turned sideways, and shoved herself into freezing stone throat first. Jagged edges tore her sleeves. Her belly brushed rock, and panic clawed up her chest. Not now. Not stuck. Not here. She pushed with her bound feet until the tunnel dropped sharply. Icy water swallowed her to the waist. The shock stole her voice. Teeth chattering, she felt along the wall until fingers found roots and an old maintenance hatch. Kicked once. Twice. The rusted latch snapped. She spilled into the herb stores behind the lower kitchens. The room was dark, fragrant with dried yarrow and wormwood, familiar enough to hurt. She staggered to a workbench and slammed her chains against its edge until one cuff cracked. Skin tore. She ignored it. From memory, she grabbed pouches, starleaf, salt, bitterroot, and a skin of clean water. Her satchel still hung where she'd hidden it weeks ago, behind hanging bundles of thyme. She nearly sobbed at the sight. Bells began ringing overhead. First bell. Discovery. "Cell 3 is empty!" Someone shouted somewhere far too close. Evangeline ran. She cut through the smokehouse, vaulted a woodpile, and plunged into the outer yard as alarm horns split the pre-dawn dark. Snow stabbed her face. Wolves in guard leathers poured from barracks, lanterns swinging. There, at the east wall. She veered toward the old ash gate instead, where stone had cracked from last spring's thaw. Two guards converged. She flung a fistful of powdered red pepper and ash from her satchel. It burst in their eyes, buying seconds. She squeezed through the broken seam in the wall, cloak snagging, fabric ripping from shoulder to hem. Then she was in the black pines beyond Frostborn lands, running on numb feet, lungs full of knives, one hand clamped over the child inside her, and the other on her satchel like it was a promise. Behind her, hunting horns answered the dawn. By the time she crossed into Ravencrest territory, the world had narrowed to white breath and the next step. 2 days. Maybe 3. Time lost shape between snowfall, hiding in hollow logs, and waking at every crack of branch expecting teeth. She'd eaten pine nuts and half a stale heel of bread. Her milk hadn't come in yet, but her body ached with preparations she could no longer deny. Each cramp made her halt, counting breaths, praying it was strain and not labor. Ravencrest's border markers rose from the drift at noon on the 3rd day. Obsidian stakes carved with winged wolf sigils, edges lined in iron. Royal land. Zephyr Ravencrest's domain. The king wolves said his justice was swift, his temper colder than riverstone. They also said he held to formal law, even for enemies. Law was more mercy than Darius offered. Evangeline stepped over the marker and nearly collapsed. "Don't move." Spears angled from the trees, black shafts tipped with silver. 6 border sentries in raven feather cloaks emerged soundlessly, wolves close to the skin, eyes bright with suspicion. One sniffed the air and wrinkled his nose. Frostborn scent, shackles. Another circled behind her. Name. She swallowed hard. Evangeline. Shadowfang. The nearest guard's expression changed, not to recognition but to calculation. The wanted healer. "She poisoned Frostborn's Luna," someone muttered. "I didn't." Her voice cracked. "I request sanctuary under Royal Trial Code, by moonlight, please." The captain, a scarred she-wolf with a braided jawline, stepped close enough to see the bruises under her torn collar. Her gaze dropped to Evangeline's abdomen, then flicked back to her face. "You're with Pup." Evangeline's knees buckled. "Help me." The captain caught her before she hit snow. "Bind her hands, but not tight," she ordered. "If she's lying, the king will judge it. If she's telling truth, Frostborn just threw sparks at dry timber." They marched her through pine and frozen ravines toward the capital keep. A jagged black fortress rising from cliffside, banners snapping like crows' wings. Drums echoed from within the walls. Petition day, she realized dimly. Public court. By the time they hauled her into the obsidian throne room, her vision tunneled at the edges. Heat struck first, braziers blazing along columns carved with old runes. Then sound. Armor clinking, courtiers whispering, boots shifting on bloodstone tiles. At the far end, on a raised dais beneath a carved wolf sigil, sat Alpha King Zephyr Ravencrest. He was larger than rumor, broad-shouldered in dark mail, black hair tied back from a face cut in hard lines. His eyes were winter metal, unreadable. A scar crossed his left brow like lightning caught in skin. The captain dropped to one knee. My king. Border Patrol apprehended a Frostborn fugitive claiming sanctuary by moonlight. A herald unrolled a parchment. Evangeline Shadowfang, accused in Frostborn of treasonous malpractice leading to the Luna's miscarriage. Whispers sharpened into hissing judgment. Poisoner. Chain her in the lower pit. Frostborn wants extradition. Evangeline tried to stand straight and failed. Blood roared in her ears. Zephyr watched her without blinking, expression carved from stone. Look at me, he said. His voice was not loud, it still stilled the room. She lifted her chin. For one suspended heartbeat, nothing existed but the distance between throne and chain. Then a violent cramp tore through her, doubling her over. A wet warmth spilled down her thighs onto black stone. Gasps erupted. The midwife nearest the dais shouted, "She's in labor!" Zephyr rose from the throne in a single fluid movement, eyes flaring silver as her scent hit him full force, and Evangeline, clutching her belly, met his gaze and felt the first snap of something ancient and incandescent begin to pull tight. The pull tightened so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Evangeline folded around it, one knee striking bloodstone, chains clattering, breath shredding in her throat. Heat flashed through her body in bright, violent waves. Pain, yes, but threaded with something else. A pulse that wasn't hers, a deep thrum like a second heart suddenly beating under her skin. "Get the shackles off her," Zephyr barked. A counselor near the dais sputtered, "My king, she is accused of—" Zephyr turned his head. His eyes burned from iron gray to molten gold. "I gave an order." No one spoke after that. The captain who had brought Evangeline in dropped beside her, hands quick on the locks while the palace midwife shoved through clustered courtiers, skirts hitched, expression fierce. "Move!" the midwife snapped. "Unless you plan to deliver this child yourself, give me space." Another contraction ripped through Evangeline. She bit down on a cry and failed. The sound came out feral, wolf raw, and echoed up the obsidian columns. Sweat slicked her neck. Her vision blurred, sharpened, blurred again. She could smell everyone, fear, curiosity, hostility, and through it all, one scent cut clean as winter lightning. Pine smoke, steel, and storm. Zephyr. He was still descending the steps from the throne. Each pace he took, that strange inner thread pulled tighter, as if something inside her recognized him before her mind could. No. No. Impossible. "Breathe with me," the midwife ordered, cupping Evangeline's face. "In. Out. Good girl. Again." Evangeline obeyed because she had no choice. Between contractions, she heard the whispers skittering around the chamber. "She brought a bastard into the throne room. Shadowfang witchcraft. Frostborn said her line died out centuries ago." At that, anger flared through the agony. She planted her palms, shoved herself upright and growled, "Don't call my child!" Pain speared low, and she doubled over again. A strong hand braced her shoulder before she hit the floor. Zephyr's hand. Heat shot through her at the contact, not like fever, like being struck by living current. She jerked, eyes snapping up to his. For a heartbeat, they just stared. His breath caught sharply, chest lifting once. Gold flickered brighter in his irises. His nostrils flared like he was trying to place a scent that had just rewritten the world. Evangeline felt it then, truly felt it. A molten line snapping from her sternum to his, a bond thread slamming into place so suddenly her pulse lurched to match his. Her wolf surged to the surface, not in threat. In recognition so fierce it made her dizzy. Mate. The word flashed through her like a blade and a prayer. Terror chased it instantly. He was king, judge, the wolf who could still condemn her before sundown. She was bleeding on his floor, accused and half broken. Another contraction ended thought. She screamed this time, claws scraping stone. Now, the midwife said, push. The chamber narrowed to pain and effort, and the warm pressure of Zephyr's hand still anchoring her shoulder. She pushed until her vision sparked black, pushed through tearing fire, pushed while someone prayed to the moon in a shaking whisper and someone else retched behind a pillar. Then suddenly, release. A thin, wet silence hung for one impossible breath. The midwife lifted the newborn, clearing tiny lungs with practiced hands, and the child opened its mouth. The first cry blasted through the throne room like a war horn. Not loud, vast. Sound hit stone and came back doubled. Ancient runes carved along the throne dais flared silver-white in a rushing chain, one after another, racing up columns and across the ceiling vault. Gasps erupted. The carved wolf sigil above the throne shuddered and split down the center with a crack, like breaking ice. Courtiers dropped to their knees in panic. One elder crossed himself with moon signs, another whispered hoarse, ancestral wards. Awakened. Shadowfang. Someone breathed, no longer as an insult, as fact. Evangeline sagged, shaking, blood cooling on her thighs, tears stinging her eyes she refused to let fall. The midwife wrapped the child in linen and turned toward the dais, frozen halfway by indecision. Zephyr solved it by stepping forward and taking the newborn himself. The moment his hands closed around their pup, the mate bond detonated. Evangeline gasped like she'd been struck in the chest. Heat roared down her spine, pooled low in her belly, then streamed outward in silver pulses. Her heartbeat slammed into his rhythm and held. She could feel him, his shock, his fierce protective surge, the almost reverent awe, like emotions crossing the thread between them without words. Zephyr went utterly still, staring at the child, then at her. Slowly, before the whole court, the Alpha King lowered himself to one knee on bloodstone in front of an accused exile. He cradled the newborn against his chest, looked directly into Evangeline's wrecked, furious, terrified face, and said in a voice gone rough with something older than law, "Mine." A shudder went through the chamber. Mine, the bond echoed, but not possession, not cage, recognition. Claim offered and answered in blood and bone. Evangeline didn't know whether to bare her throat or bite his hand. Relief hit so hard it made her nauseous. Rage followed close behind. At fate, at timing, at needing this man now when she had learned to trust no one. Yet beneath both, fierce and bewildering, a truth settled. For the first time since the accusations began, someone was looking at her like she was precious instead of polluted. She swayed. Zephyr rose immediately, crossing the small distance between them. "She's burning," the midwife said, touching Evangeline's brow. "Post-birth fever risk. She needs clean linens, broth, and quiet." "The dungeon infirmary is ready," a guard offered. "No." Zephyr's answer hit like a slammed door. "Prepare my war chamber." Several heads snapped up. "My king," a counselor hissed. "That is not—" Zephyr didn't look at him. "Anyone with an objection can challenge me at dusk." Silence. He turned back to Evangeline, gentler than she would have believed an hour ago. "Can you stand?" I can. Her knees gave. He caught her before she fell, one arm around her shoulders, careful of the child between them. Even half-conscious, she felt him restrain his strength, as if afraid to break what he touched. As he carried her out of the throne room, runes still dimly glowing overhead, Evangeline heard whispers trailing after them like smoke. Shadowfang lives. The king knelt. He called her mate. In the corridor's dim torchlight, she let her eyes close for just a second and listened to two heartbeats, hers and his, striking in the same relentless rhythm. She woke to wool blankets, cedar smoke, and a ceiling mapped with military campaigns. For one confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the scent hit. Pine, steel, storm, and memory slammed back in. Bloodstone floor, runes, the crack of stone, Zephyr's voice. Her hand flew to her side. The bassinet stood within arm's reach of the bed, carved dark oak, lined with rabbit fur. Their pup slept in a tight swaddle, tiny mouth parted, one fist free. Evangeline exhaled shakily and only then noticed the room itself. Not a sick ward, not a cell. Zephyr's war chamber. Map tables pushed to the walls, weapons racked in precise rows, brazier banked low for warmth. A privacy screen had been set up near a washstand, but no servants fluttered around it. Only the palace midwife sat dozing in a chair, and Zephyr knelt by the hearth grinding something in a mortar. He looked up at the rustle of blankets. "You're awake." She tried to push herself upright and hissed. Pain flashed through her abdomen. "Slowly," he said, already there, one hand behind her shoulders, the other steadying the cup on the bedside table. "You tore, fever spiked and broke twice." "Where are my chains?" she asked, voice rough. "Gone." "You're not keeping me under guard?" A muscle moved in his jaw. "There are guards outside, to keep others out, not you in." Distrust rose on instinct. "Why?" He held her gaze. "Because half this keep saw old runes answer your child's cry. Because I said you are my mate. Because someone hunted you to my border in shackles while pregnant and expects me to hand you back politely." None of that sounded like a lie. She hated that relief warmed her anyway. The midwife stirred, checked Evangeline's pulse, nodded approval, and left after a murmured warning about hydration and rest. Zephyr closed the door behind her and set the lock. Evangeline tensed. He noticed. "Privacy," he said quietly. "Not prison." Then, before she could answer, he sat on the floor beside the bed and lifted her forearm with astonishing care. Her wrists were wrapped in clean linen, but rust-burned cuts still glared angry red beneath salve. "I need to clean these again," he said. "May I?" The question stunned her more than the birth had. Kings didn't ask. She swallowed. "Do it." He worked in silence, dipping cloth in warm water, wiping blood and grime from the torn skin as if each scrape mattered. When she flinched, he paused. When she cursed, he almost smiled. His hands were calloused from blades, too big for such delicate work, yet he was meticulous. "Who taught you this?" she asked before she could stop herself. "You," he said. Her brow furrowed. He nodded toward a stack of papers on the table. Her papers, her healer's notes, the satchel contents she'd snatched from the herb store. "You wrote protocols for restraint abrasions in your field manual. Ravencrest medics use them." She stared at him. He had read her work. While she had been branded poisoner across 2 territories, this feared king had read her notes. A cramp seized her lower belly. After pains, brutal and sudden. She gasped, nails biting into the blanket. Without hesitation, Zephyr offered his forearm. "Grip." She did, reflexively, claws punching through skin. Blood welled in 4 clean crescents. He did not flinch. Instead, he began to hum, low and steady. An old northern lullaby her mother used to sing in winter, one so old most packs had forgotten the words. Their pup stirred in the bassinet, fussed once, then settled to the vibration of his voice. When the pain ebbed, Evangeline loosened her hand, horrified at the blood on him. "I'm sorry." He glanced at the marks like they were nothing. "You didn't break the bone." She gave a weak, disbelieving laugh. Later, fever dragged her under again. She woke near midnight to the smell of bitter root steeping in hot water. Zephyr stood by the hearth, sleeves rolled, measuring crushed bark with exacting precision. "That ratio is wrong if the root is winter-dried," she mumbled, still half asleep. He didn't startle. "I know. I adjusted for potency." He brought the cup over. "2 swallows now, one after dawn." She took it, tasted, blinked. "This is my blend. I memorized your margin notes." "Why?" His gaze moved to the bassinet, then back to her. "Because if your body fails, so does my pup's mother. And because gentleness that only appears in public is a costume. I have no use for costumes." The words landed heavier than vows. She searched his face for calculation, found exhaustion and iron control, and something fiercely restrained. He could have used her weakness. Forced answers, forced obedience, forced bond completion while she was too torn and tired to resist. Instead, he asked permission to touch her wounds. "Why haven't you marked me?" she asked quietly. "It would silence your court." His eyes darkened, wolf glinting. "A bond bite given without choice is not mating, it is conquest." His voice dropped. "I will not cage you to prove I can protect you." Silence stretched. The brazier popped softly. Evangeline looked down at his forearm, at the 4 drying claw marks she had given him. He wore them openly. Confusion and caution still sat heavy in her chest. But beneath them, a small dangerous thing stirred. Trust, thin as first ice. By the next council bell, the keep smelled of tension and polished steel. Zephyr had insisted she attend despite the midwife's protests, had her seated in a high-backed chair near the throne with blankets over her legs and their pup in her arms. Not hidden in private chambers, not whispered about behind doors, displayed, deliberately, at his right hand. The council chamber filled in ranks. Ravencrest generals, archivists, trade stewards, and 3 elders from the Old Blood Council in white ceremonial fur. Their faces looked carved from old grievance. Elder Varen spoke first, chin lifted. "Your Majesty, before policy can proceed, contamination must be contained." Evangeline stiffened. Varen didn't even glance at her. "The female is under foreign accusation of regicide-adjacent malpractice. Her bloodline is undocumented and historically volatile. The infant triggered unstable runes in the throne room. For pack safety, both should be placed under silver ward until lineage can be purged if necessary." Purged. Her grip tightened around the swaddled bundle. Milk let down painfully at the stress. Her wolf raised hackles under skin. Another elder, Melis, leaned forward, eyes fixed on the child. Silver gloves gleamed over her fingers. "The babe should be removed to neutral custody immediately." She stood and took 1 step down from the council tier. Evangeline bared her teeth before she could stop herself. "Don't." Melis ignored her and reached for the blanket. The room temperature dropped like a cliff. Zephyr did not rise, yet his aura exploded outward. Alpha force, ancient and lethal. It hit the chamber in a visible ripple. Chairs groaned, papers scattered. Every elder slammed back into their seat as if pinned by invisible claws. Frost laced across goblet rims and crawled up the carved arms of the council table. Melis gasped, hand frozen inches from the child. Zephyr's voice came out as a growl edged in ice. "Anyone who touches my mate or heir loses rank, land, and throat, in that order." No one breathed. Varen strained against the pressure, face modeling. "You would threaten the council over—" "I am the council until further notice." Zephyr's eyes flashed feral gold. and you will address high claims with evidence, not fear-drenched superstition." He turned slightly, enough to include the entire chamber in his next words. "Record this decree. Evangeline Shadowfang is under royal protection and recognized as my mate by bond witness of the throne runes. Effective immediately, she holds authority over all palace medicine, infirmary practice, and birthright protocol. Any accusation regarding poison, miscarriage, or ritual contamination will pass through her office and truth stone review before tribunal." Shock rippled through the room harder than his aura had. A general blinked. "Your Majesty, that authority includes elder households." "Correct." Malus found her voice, brittle with outrage. "You would place a suspected poisoner over our birthing chambers?" Zephyr leaned forward. "I would place the most qualified healer in the keep where she should have been from the start." Then, quieter and far more dangerous, "Test me." No one did. The frost on the goblets began to melt. Pressure eased enough for shoulders to lower, lungs to fill. Malus sank fully back into her chair, silver-gloved hands clenched white. Evangeline sat very still, their pup warm against her chest, heart hammering for reasons that had nothing to do with fear now, protection she understood as walls and weapons. This was different. This was power redistributed in open daylight, where everyone could witness it and remember. Zephyr glanced at her just once, checking, not commanding. Something in her chest unclenched. When the chamber clerk came trembling with decree tablets for confirmation, she took the stylus Zephyr offered and signed her name beside his. Evangeline Shadowfang. Not erased, not exiled, not asking permission to exist. As murmurs swelled and courtiers recalculated every alliance in the room, she lifted her chin and met the stares head-on. For the first time in months, she did not feel like prey, and when Zephyr's hand settled briefly at the back of her chair, present, steady, giving her the choice to lean in or not, she let her shoulder brush his knuckles before either of them looked away. As murmurs swelled around the council table, Zephyr's hand withdrew from the back of her chair, giving her space even in victory. "Your Majesty." The chamber clerk bowed so low his nose nearly touched the tablet in his hands. "Border Intelligence requests immediate audience. Marked urgent." Zephyr didn't look away from Evangeline. "Bring them." A hooded runner was ushered in between two guards, snow still crusted on his boots. He dropped to one knee and held up a sealed tube of black bone. "Intercepted at the North Ridge," he said. "Courier from Frostborn. He swallowed poison before questioning." This was hidden in his boot. Captain Sable took the tube, sniffed the seal, and grimaced. "Nightbane lacquer." Evangeline's stomach turned. Darius's favorite way to keep mouths shut. Zephyr gestured. "Open it." Inside lay a thin slate tablet etched with old script and a shard of memory crystal wrapped in wolf hide. Elder Varen leaned in despite himself, pale eyes widening. "The prophecy of hollow blood," he whispered. "I thought this lost." Evangeline took one look and felt cold crawl up her spine. "No," she said. "You thought this buried." All eyes swung to her. She reached for the tablet, fingers steady only because she forced them to be. The cuts were too sharp, too new. The weathering had been faked with ash oil. And in the lower right corner, nearly invisible, was a tiny crescent nick where the engraving stylus slipped left-handed. Darius was left-handed. "This isn't ancient," she said, voice flattening into healer precision. "It was carved within the last year. The script mimics pre-Crown dialect but repeats a grammatical contraction that didn't exist in that era. And this seal..." She touched the edge. "Frostborn court wax, mixed with powdered mica to imitate lunar stone." Varen bristled. "You expect us to trust your reading over..." Over the table, Zephyr bared just enough teeth that Varen shut his mouth. "Play the crystal," Zephyr ordered. Sable set the shard in a scry cradle. Light bled across the chamber wall, shaky and gray. A storeroom came into view, barrels, ledger shelves, torchlight. Then Darius stepped into frame, profile unmistakable. "Witnesses are paid?" he asked someone off-screen. A man's voice, trembling. "Yes, advisor. 2 guards and the apothecary clerk. They'll swear she carried Nightbane." "Good. Make sure the healer's ledger pages are burned, not hidden." Darius's tone was bored. "When she's branded, move fast. The child must be taken before first cry if possible. If not, the binding can still be done with fresh blood." Evangeline stopped breathing. On the wall, the unseen man stammered. "And if the king refuses transfer?" Darius smiled at something out of frame. "Kings refuse many things until their wells run bitter." The crystal image jolted, fractured with static, then resumed long enough for one final line. "Remember, Shadowfang blood does not sit on thrones. It kneels under them." The projection died. Silence hit hard enough to ring. Varen looked sick. Malus had gone chalk white. Around them, generals exchanged the kind of glances that remap loyalties in real time. Zephyr's voice was calm in the way avalanches are calm. "By witness of crystal and forged tablet, Darius Frostborn is named traitor to Ravencrest and conspirator in false tribunal charges against my mate. Seal the gates, double guard on wells, nurseries, and archive vaults." Sable thumped a fist to her chest and strode out barking orders. Evangeline still stared at the dead crystal, hearing his words from the cell all over again, repurposed. Zephyr moved closer, not touching. "Talk to me." She swallowed once, hard. "He was my mother's brother. After she died, he raised me in Frostborn Court." Her laugh was brittle. Raised isn't the right word. Managed. Measured. Corrected. Her nails bit into her palm. He collected relics, blood charms, old ritual scraps no one sane uses. Said history belonged to wolves willing to pay for it. "He wants the pup for blood magic," Zephyr said. "He wants control." Her voice sharpened. "If he can bind a Shadowfang heir to a forged prophecy, he can call it divine necessity and leash half the packs through fear." Zephyr nodded once. No dismissal, no soothing lies, just strategy. "Then we cut his leash." By nightfall, the keep moved like a drawn bow. Ravencrest guards sealed cistern rooms. Kitchen stores were inventoried twice. Every apothecary jar passed through Evangeline's hands, or those of healers she personally selected. Zephyr gave her authority in words at council. Now he backed it in steel. Any steward who argued found a royal sentinel at their elbow and a written decree in their face. She should have felt safer. Instead, she found wolfsbane dust in the hinge seam of the west infirmary door. Not enough to kill. Enough to sicken pups and nursing mothers. She held up the gray-green smear under lamplight. This was planted. The young medic beside her went green. Who would... Someone testing response time. Evangeline corked the sample vial. Or mapping blind spots. When she stepped into the corridor, Zephyr was already there, as if the bond had carried her alarm ahead of her. His jaw tightened at the sight of the vial. "How many exposures?" "None yet. I caught it before rounds." She hesitated. "Whoever placed it knew where routine checks are weakest. They understand palace flow." "Inside help," he said grimly. He walked with her through 3 more infirmary wings, silent except for clipped orders into runner stones. Their shoulders brushed once near the stairwell. Heat sparked through the mate thread, immediate and disorienting. She pretended not to feel it. His mouth tightened like he was pretending too. At the lower kitchens, they found a scullion trying to slip out with a satchel of silver thread gloves and a coded note. Under questioning and Sable's very direct presence, he cracked quickly. "Whitethorn," he babbled through chattering teeth. "It's not just Frostborn. Some Ravencrest houses pledged to advisor Darius. They said the king's been ensorcelled, that the child's cry cracked throne wards because corruption's already started. He sobbed harder when Zephyr's aura brushed him. Naming ceremony is when it happens. They said everyone important will be in one room. Evangeline went cold. What happens? I don't know all of it. Smoke in the hall. Gates opened from inside. The advisor promised no blood if the child is surrendered. Zephyr looked at Sable. There is always blood. The scullion was dragged away. Zephyr rubbed a hand over his face, fatigue carving deeper lines into his scar. Postpone the naming, Evangeline said immediately. He shook his head. If we postpone, we look cornered. Houses on the fence flip to Darius by dawn. So we gather every target in one place because optics are better? His eyes flashed. Because power is theater, and if we surrender the stage, we fight this war hallway by hallway with civilians between us and blades. She hated that he was probably right. I can increase antidote stations, she said, already calculating. Starleaf wash at every entrance. Resin braziers to neutralize airborne wolfsbane. Rotate tasters on the wells every hour. He studied her for a beat, then nodded. Do it. And Evangeline, sleep for at least 2 hours. She almost laughed. You first. A ghost of a smile tugged his mouth despite everything. Command accepted. High Luna Healer. The title should have felt ceremonial. Instead, it settled on her shoulders like armor. As they turned toward the nursery wing, a cluster of courtiers parted fast, eyes tracking them with open speculation. She heard the whispers anyway. She's in his rooms. He hasn't marked her. Maybe the bond failed. The thread between her and Zephyr pulsed, annoyance from him, thorny hurt from her, protectiveness from both. It was getting harder to hide from each other across that line. Pressure mounted from every side, political, physical, intimate. If she leaned into him, she might lose herself. If she didn't, she might lose everything else. Past midnight, she found him in the war chamber with their pup asleep on his bare chest. He sat propped against the bedhead, map parchments abandoned at his side, one broad hand spread protectively over the tiny, swaddled body rising and falling with soft breaths. Firelight painted gold along his throat. He looked less like a king in that moment, and more like a man trying not to break anything fragile. Evangeline paused in the doorway, held by the sight. Zephyr glanced up, voice low. He refused the bassinet unless he could hear a heartbeat. Stubborn, she murmured. He gets it from you. She snorted softly and crossed to the hearth, adding crushed starleaf to a warming pot. The room smelled of bitter herbs and smoke and skin. Outside, wind scraped the shutters. For a while they worked in companionable quiet, her grinding resin, him rocking their son when he fussed. The bond thread hummed between them. Less wildfire now, more current. Tell me something true, Zephyr said suddenly. She stilled. About what? About you. Not the accusations. You. Evangeline stared into the mortar. I don't sleep with doors closed. He waited. Darius used to lock me in archive vaults when I argued. Said darkness taught obedience. She kept her voice flat by force. I learned to count breaths between patrol steps so I'd know when someone might come. Sometimes, no one came until morning. A long silence. When she finally looked up, Zephyr's expression had gone dangerous in a new, quiet way. I should have found you sooner, he said. The words hit harder than pity would have. She shook her head. You didn't know I existed. I should have known what he was. She almost said we were all fooled, but that wasn't true. She had seen cracks for years and called them shadows because facing the whole shape would have demanded war. She poured tonic into 2 cups, handed him one. Their fingers touched. Heat licked up her wrist. What's something true about you? She asked. His gaze dropped to the sleeping pup. My mother died in birthing fever because the Elder Council delayed a healer over lineage protocol. My father obeyed procedure and buried her by moonrise. His jaw worked once. I took the throne at 19 and rewrote half the medical code before I learned how to negotiate grain tariffs. Evangeline sank onto the edge of the bed. That's why you moved me from the dungeon infirmary. That's why I won't let councils decide who gets care based on pedigree. Emotion rose swift and raw. She swallowed it down and failed. I couldn't save Frostborn's Luna, she whispered. Even knowing I was framed, part of me keeps thinking if I had checked one more cup, one more jar. Zephyr shifted, careful not to wake the baby, and touched 2 fingers under her chin until she met his eyes. That guilt is not proof, he said. It's a wound. Her breath trembled. The walls she'd mortared brick by brick over months of accusation thinned in the firelight. She leaned forward before she could overthink and rested her forehead briefly against his. No claim, no bite, just contact. His exhale shuddered against her skin. Evangeline. Don't make promises you can't keep, she whispered. I won't. His voice went rough. But I will keep the ones I make. He could have kissed her. She could have let him. Instead, he brushed his thumb once over her knuckles, an asking touch, patient even now, and settled their sleeping son more securely between them. Her walls didn't fall all at once, but they opened a door. The naming ceremony began at dusk under a ceiling of hammered silver moons. Ravencrest tradition demanded witnesses. Nobles, soldiers, healers, neighboring emissaries, and enough common pack voices to bind the child's name to the land. Zephyr stood at the Moonwell dais in ceremonial black, crown set aside for once. Evangeline stood beside him in deep blue wool, their pup bundled against her heart. Resin braziers burned clean at each pillar per her orders. Healers she trusted lined the walls with antidote satchels at the ready. Everything was too perfect. As the herald lifted his staff, Evangeline caught a scent beneath the incense. Sharp, green, wrong. Wolfsbane. Zephyr, she breathed. At the same instant, 3 braziers along the east colonnade burst, not with flame, but with thick gray smoke. Wolves in the nearest rows coughed, staggered, eyes glazing silver-sick. Panic snapped through the hall like a whip. Masks! Evangeline shouted. Starleaf cloths now! Her healers moved fast, but not fast enough. One guard dropped to his knees vomiting, another clawed at his throat. Then the great west doors boomed open. Darius Frostborn strode through the smoke in white ceremonial fur darkened by travel, flanked by armed wolves wearing mixed sigils. Frostborn ice knots sewn beside Ravencrest ravenwings split down the center. White thorn. He looked older than she remembered and infinitely more dangerous, like rot given a crown. My king, he called, voice amplified by some charm carrying to every corner. Stand down, and this need not become slaughter. By covenant of hollow blood, I claim custody of the corrupted air for purification. Gasps, screams, steel ringing free of sheaths. Zephyr stepped in front of Evangeline, aura flaring like a storm front. You forged that covenant. Did I? Darius lifted a tablet, another copy of the false prophecy, and smiled thinly. Belief is the only ink that matters. From the balcony above, hidden crossbowmen rose from behind drapes. Down! Sable roared. Bolts rained. 2 struck the dais rail. 1 buried in a courtier's shoulder. Chaos detonated. Loyal guards charged while traitors turned on them at arm's length. The air thickened with smoke and blood and wolfsbane bitterness. Evangeline shoved their pup into the arms of a masked midwife. South alcove! Keep him low! She ripped open a satchel, flinging crushed starleaf into nearest braziers to thin the toxin haze. Green sparks flared, smoke shifting. Around her, coughing eased just enough for Ravencrest fighters to regain footing. Darius saw and snarled, Get her! 3 assassins broke toward the dais. Zephyr met the first with a sword stroke that split mail and bone. Sable took the second at the knee. The third vaulted a fallen chair and came straight for Evangeline. She drew the ceremonial moonblade from the naming altar and caught his dagger hand mid-strike. Shock flashed across his face before her elbow smashed his throat. "Tunnel!" Zephyr snapped at her between clashes. "Now! I'm not leaving you. That's an order." Another explosion rocked the hall. Somewhere behind the smoke, a hidden gate groaned open. More armed wolves poured in. Through the shifting haze, Evangeline saw Darius backing toward the north passage, not retreating blindly, angling, deliberate, toward the corridor that led to the ancestral vault and archive wards. Her blood went ice cold. He wasn't here just for a public seizure. He was going for the records. And if he reached the vault first, he could rewrite truth itself before the hall stopped burning. He wasn't here just for a public seizure. He was going for the records. "Zephyr!" Evangeline shouted over the clash of steel. "The vault! He's heading for the ancestral vault!" Zephyr turned in the middle of a killing stroke, blood on his jaw, eyes wild gold in the smoke. "Tunnel! Now!" "If he touches the ward stones, he can rewrite every claim in this room." A traitor guard slammed into Zephyr from the side. He gutted the man and roared, "Sable! Get her to the—" Evangeline didn't wait for the rest. She ducked under a swinging blade, grabbed her healer's satchel from where it had fallen at the dais, and bolted for the north passage with the moonblade in her other hand. Someone shouted her name behind her. Zephyr, furious and afraid through the mate thread. But the sound drowned beneath another blast from the smoke braziers. The corridor beyond the ceremony hall was dim and already hazing green-gray. Wolfsbane bit the back of her throat. Two palace guards lay crumpled near a side arch, coughing blood-flecked foam. Evangeline dropped to her knees, ripped open her satchel, and crushed Starleaf between her palms until fragrant oil slicked her skin. "Breathe through this," she ordered, pressing the leaves under one guard's nose. To the other she thrust a cloth packet. "Chew. Don't swallow the fibers." "Lady!" The first guard gasped. "Traitors! Open the vent grates." "I know." She grabbed a vial of saltfire resin, smashed it against the wall torch, and flung the flaming paste into the nearest vent shaft. Blue-white fire whooshed, then burned clean and hot, eating toxin pockets as it ran the metal veins overhead. She pointed at the less injured guard. "Can you stand?" He nodded weakly. "Go back to the moon hall. Tell Captain Sable. Starleaf and Saltfire at every intake vent. Rotate teams, masks wet with vinegar. Move." He staggered up and ran. A fresh pulse of danger slammed through the bond. Zephyr under attack, close, alive. Evangeline shoved panic down and kept moving. North Passage narrowed into archive stairs. At the top landing, 3 white thorn wolves were forcing an iron gate. One turned at her footsteps and grinned. "Advisor said you'd come." He lunged. She ducked, drove the moonblade upward through his mail gap, and yanked it free as the second swung an axe. The axe glanced off stone, showering sparks. She kicked his knee sideways. Bone snapped. The third wolf, smaller, quicker, slashed her forearm with a hooked knife before she could parry. Pain flared bright. She hissed, spun, and opened his throat in one clean arc. Breathing hard, arm bleeding, she shoved the dead wolf's body against the gate, used his weight as leverage, and forced the half-jammed bars open. The ancestral vault door waited beyond, black oak bound in meteoric iron, carved with runes older than the keep itself. Shadowfang script braided through Ravencrest law marks. Someone had already smeared blood over the lock sigils. Wrong blood. The runes flickered, rejecting it. Inside the chamber, Darius stood before the central oath pillar, one hand on a mirrored wardstone pedestal, the forged prophecy tablet in the other. 2 more conspirators held crystal prisms ready for imprint. He looked over his shoulder and smiled. "You always were difficult to bury." Evangeline stepped into the vault and kicked the door shut behind her. The boom echoed off shelves of bone tablets and brass-bound ledgers, the true spine of pack history, records every elder had sworn were complete, while her line was cut from them like rot. Above, mirrored wardstones hung in a ring, dim and waiting. Darius clicked his tongue. "Where is your king? I expected more drama." "You'll have enough." She kept the moonblade low, point angled toward his heart. Blood dripped from her sliced forearm to the stone at her feet. "Walk away from the pillar." His gaze dropped to the blood, and hunger sharpened his features. Shadowfang blood on oath stone. "You save me steps." Behind him, one conspirator lifted a crossbow toward her. She moved first, threw a packet of powdered nettle and ash into his face. He screamed, blinded, bolt firing wild into the ceiling. The second charged with a short sword. Evangeline blocked, metal shrieking, then slammed her satchel into his temple hard enough to drop him. Darius sighed. "Still using herbs like weapons. Your mother did that. Before she learned obedience." Rage flashed so hot she nearly rushed him. She forced herself still. "You don't get to say her name." He spread his arms, prophecy tablet held up like a priest's text. "I gave you purpose, shelter, education. You were a half-wild girl with old blood and no future until I shaped one." "You forged one," she snapped, "out of corpses." A tremor rolled through the keep, distant fighting, doors breaking somewhere below. Time was thinning. Evangeline backed toward the eastern wall where a low brazier burned for record-sealing wax. She upended a pouch into the coals. Crushed starleaf, salt fire resin, and bitterroot rind. Acrid green smoke leapt, then thinned into a sharp, clean vapor. The wolfsbane haze in the vault recoiled, unraveling. Her lungs expanded fully for the first time in minutes. Darius's lip curled. "You can cleanse air. You can't cleanse blood. Watch me." She slashed her own palm with the moonblade and pressed it to the central lock rune at the oath pillar's base. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Shadowfang glyph under her hand ignited silver. Runes raced across the floor in branching lines, up the pillar, into the ring of mirrored wardstones overhead. Every mirror flared to life, not reflecting the vault, but projecting outward, into linked stones across the palace, including the throne room where the coup still raged. Darius lunged for the pedestal controls. Evangeline's shoulder checked him off balance and slammed a confession crystal from his table into the truth socket. Light speared upward. Images exploded into the air above them, enlarged and impossible to deny. Darius bribing witnesses. Darius ordering ledger pages burned. Darius directing wolfsbane shipments marked as winter grain. A ledger of payouts to white-thorn houses, names and seals clear as daylight. In the mirror nearest Evangeline, she could see the moon hall receiving the same projection, wolves freezing mid-fight as truth lit the smoke. Darius snarled and snatched a second crystal from his sleeve. "You think fragments win wars?" He jammed it toward the socket to overwrite the feed. Evangeline caught his wrist with her bleeding hand and drove her elbow into his throat. The crystal skittered across the floor. He recovered fast, faster than she remembered, and slammed her against the oath pillar hard enough to rattle her teeth. Ritual dagger flashed into his hand. Bone handle, obsidian edge etched for binding cuts. "Choice, niece," he hissed, blade at her ribs. "Come quietly, and I may let the pup live long enough to be useful." Through the bond, Zephyr's fury struck like thunder. He was close, maybe 2 corridors away. "No," Evangeline said, and bared her teeth. "I choose me." She stamped Darius's instep, twisted under his knife arm and tore free, leaving skin and blood on the blade but not the deep strike he wanted. She kicked the fallen crystal into the truth socket herself. This one didn't show bribes. It showed a tea service in Frostborn's lunar chambers. Darius's hand adding clear drops from a black vial into a cup set aside with Evangeline's healer seal. His recorded voice, calm. She drinks this after second bell. If the Luna steals her tea again, unfortunate, but useful. The image shifted to panic, blood on white sheets, Darius shouting accusations while Evangeline fought to stop the bleeding. Gasps erupted from every mirrored projection point. In the distance, even through stone, she heard the moon hall roar as the truth reached it. Darius's face went murder flat. "You meddling bitch!" He came at her with the dagger. He was heavier, older, but fueled by desperation and magic wrought. Evangeline backpedaled around the oath pillar as he slashed in tight, practiced arcs aimed for arteries, not showy kills. The ritual blade nicked her shoulder, burning cold. Binding ink hissed where it touched skin. "Hold still," Darius growled. "You were always easier on your knees." She feinted left, then pivoted right and sliced the moon blade across his forearm. Shallow. Not enough. He laughed, breath ragged. "You think healer hands can—" She ducked his next thrust, stepped inside his reach, and drove the hilt of the moon blade into his jaw. Bone cracked. He stumbled, dropping to one knee, but still swung the dagger upward toward her belly. Instinct screamed. She twisted. Obsidian kissed cloth instead of flesh. Behind them, the vault doors boomed under pounding fists, Ravencrest guards trying to force entry through jammed runes. Darius spat blood. Too late. Whitethorn already has the wells, the gates, the nurseries. Zephyr will kneel before dawn. Evangeline's wolf surged, cold and clear. She saw the opening when he rose, his weight wrong on his right leg from her earlier kick. When he lunged again, she sidestepped, let his momentum carry him past, and brought the moon blade down in a precise diagonal cut across his wrist tendons. The dagger dropped with a clatter. Darius screamed, hand useless, and swung his other fist. She caught the blow on her forearm, pain flaring, then drove him backward into the oath pillar with all her weight, and pinned him there by crossing the moon blade under his throat. "Don't move!" she hissed. He bucked, snarling, blood-slicking stone. "You can't kill me. I am your blood." "You were?" she said. The vault doors burst inward. Zephyr hit the chamber first like a storm given claws, Sable and 6 guards at his back. He took one look, Evangeline bleeding but standing, Darius pinned, truth projections burning overhead, and bared his fangs in something like pride and murder. "Secure the room," he ordered. Guards seized the 2 surviving conspirators. Sable kicked the ritual dagger out of reach and planted a boot on Darius's knee. The oath pillar's runes shifted from silver to hard white, the truth-binding mode used for royal testimony. Under that light, lies curdled in the throat. Zephyr stepped close enough that his shadow covered Darius's face. "Speak." Darius sneered, jaw swelling. "Go to—" The rune light flared. He choked, body arching, words dragged out of him by binding law. "I forged the prophecy tablet," he gasped. "Paid. Witnesses. Altered. Medicinal records. Ordered. Wolfsbane and Ravencrest Wells." In the mirrored wardstones, the entire moon hall watched and listened. Zephyr's voice was steel. "The Luna's miscarriage." Darius convulsed once, fighting. Lost. "Poison tea. Intended for Evangeline. Luna drank it first. I let her bleed. Blamed the healer." Silence swallowed the vault so completely Evangeline could hear the hiss of wax in the brazier. Her knees nearly buckled. Not because she hadn't known, because hearing it bound in truth made the last of her doubt die for good. She met Darius's eyes, held there by light and her blade. "You ended our family the day you sold it," she said. He bared bloodied teeth. "Blood remembers vengeance." Zephyr drew his sword. "Then let it remember justice. One clean strike. Darius's head hit stone and rolled to rest against the base of the pillar he'd tried to corrupt. His body slumped. The rune light went out. No one moved for a long breath. Then, from the mirrored projection of the moon hall, a sound rose. First one voice, then dozens, then hundreds. Not panic this time, but a raw, thunderous howl of judgment answered by relief. Sable wiped her blade and looked to Evangeline. "Hi, Luna Healer. Your orders?" Evangeline stared at the dead man who had been uncle, jailer, architect of her ruin. Grief came, but thin and strange, drowned by something cleaner. "Purge every white thorn cache," she said. "Medical triage first. No reprisals without Truthstone review." Zephyr's gaze snapped to her, fierce approval burning through the bond. She lowered the moonblade, hands shaking only after it was done. Night deepened by the time the last fires were out and the last traitor disarmed. They met beneath the moonwell, where bond vows were witnessed by water and sky rather than council. The courtyard had been cleared. Snow rimmed the black stones. Moonlight poured through the open oculus and turned the well's surface to liquid silver. Their pup slept in a sling against Evangeline's chest, tiny breath warm through wool. Zephyr stood opposite her, stripped of crown and ceremonial armor, just dark shirt, blood washed from skin but not yet from memory. For once, no audience. Only Captain Sable at the far arch as silent witness, and the old midwife near the steps, arms folded like a guardian spirit pretending not to watch. Zephyr stopped an arm's length away. "I can enforce law," he said quietly. "I can punish traitors and rebuild councils. This—" His hand hovered near her throat, not touching. "I will not take without you." The mate thread pulsed between them, aching and bright, incomplete. "Do you want the bond completed, Evangeline?" No command, no pressure. A question laid bare. She looked at him, at the wolf who had knelt on Bloodstone, bled under her claws, listened when she said no, and came when she chose war. Fear still lived in her. So did want. So did the old reflex to guard her throat and run. She took one breath, then another, and reached up to unclasp the collar of her tunic. She bared the curve where neck met shoulder and tipped her head, exposing vulnerable skin to moonlight. "Yes," she whispered, "mine by choice." Zephyr's eyes flared gold. He stepped in slowly, giving her time to flinch away if she needed. She didn't. His palm cupped the back of her neck, warm and steady. "Say stop, and I stop." "Bite me, mate." A rough sound tore from his chest, half growl, half reverence. He brushed his mouth to her skin first, a warning kiss, and the bond thread sang like struck wire. Then his fangs sank in. Pain bloomed sharp and deep, anchoring at the junction of neck and shoulder. Evangeline gasped, fingers fisting in his shirt. For an instant it was only hurt, bright, claiming, undeniable. Then heat detonated. It surged from the bite through her spine in molten waves, down her arms, into her belly, across the place where she had carried fear for months. Her wolf rose to meet his, not battling, aligning. Scent exploded. Pine, frost, her own wild herbs, milk, moon water. Magic spilled from the wound in silver gold threads that coiled around their wrists, their throats, the sleeping child between them. She heard him against her skin, voice wrecked. "Mine," she answered, breathless. "Yours." He gentled the pressure, tongue soothing the mark as the magic sealed, and she felt his emotions flood the completed bond with startling clarity. Fierce protectiveness, awe, desire, and a devotion so steady it hurt worse than the bite because she believed it. Evangeline pulled back just enough to catch his face between her hands. "Your turn." Zephyr went still. "Evangeline?" "No cages," she said, echoing the vow she needed carved into both of them. "No one-sided claims. We do this as equals." His throat worked. He nodded once and dropped to one knee so she could reach without strain, bearing the heavy line of his shoulder where neck met muscle. "Take what is yours, mate." Her wolf purred fierce agreement. Evangeline leaned down and bit. His skin gave under her fangs, hot and salted with sweat. He hissed, hands clamping around her hips, not stopping her. She bit deeper, enough to mark, enough to bind, and felt his power answer, storm and iron bending, not breaking, to meet hers. Pain flashed through him and into her via the bond, transformed mid-flight into heat that pooled low and sweet, leaving both of them shaking. Silver gold magic whipped once around them like a living banner, then sank beneath skin. Zephyr's head dropped against her stomach, breath ragged. Gods! She released him and licked the mark closed, just as he had hers. Their pup startled awake in the sling and let out a tiny, indignant yip that made both of them laugh, breathless and a little wild. Zephyr rose and gathered them in, one arm around her shoulders, one hand cradling the back of their son's head. Inside the completed bond, words became feeling made clear. Safe, chosen, home. He pressed his forehead to hers. Mate. Mate, she echoed. He kissed her then, slow at first, deepening as the last of the battle adrenaline burned into something tender and fierce. When they finally broke for air, she rested against him, feeling the bond settled now. No longer a raw wire, but a braided cord humming steady under her pulse. No more cages, she whispered against his mouth. Zephyr's thumb brushed the fresh mark at her neck. Only chosen vows. They stood that way beneath the moonwell until the cold reached their boots and the baby yawned loud enough to protest both romance and politics. 3 days later, the throne room filled again, this time scrubbed clean, cracked sigil repaired with silver inlay that left the fault line visible on purpose. Evangeline stood beside Zephyr in formal black and deep blue, mating marks unhidden. Their son slept in the midwife's arms near the dais, watched by 2 guards and Captain Sable, who now wore the gold-trimmed mantle of Royal Marshal. Below them, the old Elder Council knelt. Varen shook but kept his chin up. Malus stared at the floor, silver gloves removed, bare hands mottled with age. Zephyr's voice carried to every corner. By law of coup response and truth-binding witness, the Elder Council is dissolved. A collective inhale rippled through the chamber. In its place, he continued, Ravencrest establishes a mixed tribunal. 3 war captains, 3 healers, 3 archivists, and rotating citizen jurors for civil claims. No medical accusation, birthright dispute, or bloodline challenge will be judged without truth stone review. He turned to Evangeline and offered the decree blade hilt first. She took it and stepped forward. As High Luna Healer, I accept independent authority over medical law and birthing chambers across Crown lands. Any wolf, highborn, lowborn, mated, unmated, has equal claim to care and trial. Murmurs rose, then steadied into nods as healers in the gallery thumped fists to chests. Evangeline looked down at Varen and Maelys. You supported containment and purge without evidence. Truth stones show no direct collusion with Whitethorn. Your titles are stripped. Your estates are forfeit to war widow and orphan funds. You will serve 10 years in archive restoration under guard. Malus finally looked up, stunned. You spare us. Evangeline's gaze was cool. I spare the pack another martyr tale. You will spend your remaining strength repairing what you helped erase. Sable led them away. Next came the unveiling in the adjacent record hall. Stonemasons pulled black cloth from a newly carved wall. Shadowfang lineage restored in deep-cut script, names spanning centuries, ward keepers and healers and oath witnesses once deleted from history. Evangeline stepped close and touched her mother's name. Beneath it now, newly carved, sat her own, and beneath that, their sons. The herald raised his staff for the naming, voice ringing clear. By cry that woke the throne wards and truth that broke a coup, this child is named Kaelin Ravencrest Shadowfang, called Throne Voice. Howls shook the rafters. Joy this time. The midwife handed Kaelin to Zephyr, who immediately passed him to Evangeline first before placing his hand over both of theirs. Small gesture, public meaning. Later, at the outer court feast, wolves lined up not to gawk, but to petition. A farm she-wolf asked for sanctuary review against false theft charges. A young soldier requested infirmary retraining after wolfsbane lung damage. An archivist presented charred frostborn ledgers recovered from whitethorn caches. Evangeline answered each in turn with tribunal clerks recording, Zephyr at her side, but not over her shoulder. As moonrise silvered the banners, Zephyr leaned in close enough for only her to hear. Regional envoys from South Vale arrive next week. They're willing to discuss alliance if we share tribunal protocol. She smiled, tired and real. Then we build a sanctuary charter before they get here. And after that? She glanced to where Sable was teaching two nursery guards how not to hold a spear near a cradle, to where the midwife was scolding a duke for trying to wake a sleeping baby, to the carved wall that now held her line in stone. After that, Evangeline said, shifting Kaelin higher against her shoulder, we plan for peace like it's a campaign. Zephyr kissed the mark at her neck, casual and claiming in equal measure. Ruthless to enemies. Tender at home, she finished. Their son made a sleepy, war-horn little cry that bounced off obsidian and made half the court laugh. This time, nothing cracked. Everything held.